We are live. Hello, dear Facebook friends, YouTube friends. I'm Love Coach Scott Catomus, and this is our Tuesday night extraordinary people interview series. And I'm going to pop the spotlight on one of my closest friends. I'm really grateful that Jonathan Robinson is my friend, and a good friend he is indeed. Um, However, he's not just here because he's my friend. I wanted all of you to meet him because he's an amazing author. He's written many, many best-selling books. He's been on Oprah 4 times. And he's just like a fun guy. And a lot of the Love Coach Academy shows have been kind of working on triggers and self-love and managing hard stuff. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool to have Jonathan come on? Because Jonathan knows all about joy. In fact, he literally wrote the book on it. And we'll pull it up a little bit later. His one of his recent books, all about the tools of joy. But hey, Jonathan, how you doing?
Good to see you, Scott. I'm doing good.
Yeah, yeah.
I sometimes feel guilty saying that during the pandemic, but I don't want to lie. I'm actually doing really good.
Yeah. So let's just go right there. Like, how is that? It's like a lot of people are suffering. Obviously, there's a tremendous amount of economic uncertainty, and a lot of people, a tremendous number of people have lost their jobs. To some degree, health uncertainty. I think moreover, people who have parents or grandparents that they're worried about. So, I mean, even the fact that you said that, I feel a little bit guilty. Let's go right there. Like, how can we still enjoy ourselves even though the world is in this crisis? Is that like legal? Is God going to be pissed?
Right, right. Actually, I think the world needs it now more than ever. When you're in darkness is when you need the light the most.
Yeah.
And as I was lucky. I had my midlife crisis at age 12. Uh, so, I got into suicidal depression at age 12 and then said, hey, there's got to be a way to deal with life. Self-help books, spirituality, working on myself for the last 50 years. 12. So that's really has helped. But life comes to us in moments. So just because we're in this movie called The Pandemic doesn't mean that you can't take a break from it every now and then and enjoy nature, or smooch your dog, or meditate, or do anything that helps you to feel better.
So, what are you doing? Like, what is kind of your routine, your ritual to enjoy life to the fullest?
Well, right now I'm talking to my good friend Scott Catomus, and that usually works.
I
But
like that.
when he's not available, I gotta scrounge the bottom of the barrel. So my favorite thing to do is meditate, and that's always available. But as you know, I love dogs like you, and they're having the time of their life. They think this pandemic is fantastic because I'm home all the time, and I'm smooching them a lot and going for walks. So being around happy beings like my dogs really helps. Um, and there's a tool I want to give your audiences, and not that it's always been easy. When this pandemic started, I had all these speaking engagements lined up, and they all canceled. So I lost a lot of money, and I lost a career. So that wasn't fun. But I asked myself a magical question. You're supposed to now say, what was that magical question?
What was that magical question?
Well, it's funny you should ask. What that magical question? First, I'm going to tell a 1 minute story, okay, and
Okay,
then I'll tell you the magical question.
sounds good.
Um, Once I was in Thailand, I saw this arrogant American guy go up to a little monk, and a voice accustomed to instant obedience. He says, "Monk, if you're so wise, teach me a lesson about heaven and hell." Well, the monk looks up at him and says, "Teach you about heaven and hell? I couldn't teach you anything. I mean, you're ugly, you're disgusting, you smell bad, you don't have a caring bone in your entire body. Just get out of my sight and stop wasting my time." Well, this infuriates the guy. He gets red in the face and he shakes with rage. He gets ready to punch the monk in the face. And right before he punches the monk says, "That's hell."
Mm.
And he realized that this monk risked getting beaten up by teaching him this lesson about hell. And he unclenches his fists and he bows to the monk. And the monk says, "That's heaven."
Mm.
And what I like about that story is that depending on his interpretation of what was going on, he created a moment of heaven or a moment of hell for himself. You know, when he thought he was being criticized for no reason, he created a moment of hell. When he thought that this monk had served him, he created a moment of heaven. So right now we're going through this interesting story called the worldwide pandemic. Is that a moment of hell or is that a moment of heaven? It depends on how you interpret what's going on. So, you know, at first, the first few days, I had a I don't know if I told you that I was getting ready to board a plane to New Zealand to do 20 speaking engagements there. And
Wow.
as I'm getting ready to board the plane, they say, we have an announcement. They've closed New Zealand. So I lost $40,000 in that moment.
Wow. Wow.
Because that was going to be a good part of my income for the year, you know, doing all these speaking engagements in Australia and New Zealand. So that was a moment of hell. And then I said, well, I asked myself the question, and the question was, what could potentially be good about this? Or shorthand, what could be good about this? And my brain said, nothing. And then I said, okay, well, what, if there were something that could be good about this, what could it be? And I said, well, maybe I will have to branch out into a new career. And as we talked about right before getting on this Facebook Live, I've now got a video studio in my house, and I am doing online courses, kind of like you. I've always looked at you doing these courses, and I think one day I should do that, and have avoided it. But now I'm actually doing it. I've put it off for 20 years. And finally, the pandemic led me to get this out.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I really appreciate knowing that you took a hit, and I think that that's important for people because if it was just all easy, but you took a big hit.
Yeah.
Also
Yeah.
grateful that you didn't get stranded in New Zealand. Imagine if it had been a day later you got to New Zealand and then you can't work, but you're stuck there. That would have been
Yeah.
something.
You know, you can always ask that question. And it's a good question because we don't know how the story ends. You know, like as you said, I could have gone stuck in New Zealand and been there for 2 months, you know, not being able to get out. Like I actually have a friend who is still in New Zealand. They still can't get out. You know, and he has kids. He hasn't seen his kids for 2.5 months.
Wow.
So we don't know how the story ends. You know, I have a friend who got cancer a couple of years ago, and at the time, it didn't seem like that seemed like a moment of hell. And now she says it's the best thing that ever happened to her. I'm glad it hasn't happened to me, knock on wood. But you know, you never know uh, what's good or not depending on how you interpret it. I sometimes share this that when I was a child, my stepfather used to beat me up. At the time, I thought this is not a good thing, and it wasn't. But I did have my midlife crisis age 12, and that got me, because of him. So when people ask, gee, how'd you get into this stuff so early? I say, well, I really owe it to my stepfather. And they say, wow, he must have been an amazing man. And I say, yeah, I'm really grateful to him. I don't usually tell him the story about how he put my head into a concrete wall and I lost 50% of my hearing because of it. But, that's a small price to pay if it led me to being in a good place now.
I just want to take a moment because you and I are pretty good friends. We've hung out
Yeah.
together closely. We've spent quality time together. And that's the first time I've ever heard you mention about your head being put into a wall by your stepfather.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've shared deep stuff. And I've heard about the challenges in your life, more contemporary.
Mm-hmm.
But first, I'm having a moment of empathy. Um, and I'm also having just a moment of appreciation that you're not somebody who I mean, that's clearly not something you've made a story about your life. You haven't played victim with it, you know? No, really,
I actually feel grateful about it.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
It's,
because it did lead to who I am now. And had I not had a stepfather who was violent like that, I might be a totally different person. I probably would
yeah.
be.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a interesting one because it is true. Our moments of greatest challenge, when we look back at it, when we get further away from it, we go, man, that was so damn hard. And look at how I grew, you know? And I
Yeah.
guess, I don't run around talking about this all the time, but I was like this Emmy Award winning producer of educational television.
Right.
I'd never thrown a punch in my life. I'd never had trouble with the law. And something really big happened in my life. And I ended up in the prison system for 15 months. And I was no young guy. I was in my 40s. I'm
Yeah.
64 now. And nobody thought Scott Catomus was going to go to prison, except for the prosecutor. He was very clear that that was going to happen.
Right.
And it was, I mean, it was brutal. It was just incredibly brutal
Yeah.
experience. And it absolutely shaped who I am today. And definitely, I can say it was by far the most important experience of my life in terms of really giving me, I learned so much
Yeah.
about myself, about life, about reality. And it really, really, when people say, oh, Scott, you're so compassionate, really that came from that experience.
Mm.
Um, so, yeah,
I wish
it's,
there was a way to skip the hardship to get to the good stuff, but I haven't really seen that in people.
mm,
I have this podcast in which awareness explores, where I interview spiritual leaders, and I often ask them, whether it be, Adyashanti or Byron Katie or whoever, how did you get to this place where you live in a constant state of love and peace? And they almost always talk about some horrendous experience that helped them get there.
right. Richard Alpern, Ram Dass getting thrown out of Harvard, right?
Yeah.
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 Debbie Garcia, who is our beloved goddess of gratitude, writes, and by the way, when you see me looking down, I'm reading comments from our viewers.
Okay.
She writes, yeah, I love that. Gratitude for the hard stuff. Without your dark, you wouldn't know your spark, which is a Debism.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Um, so when when we're working with people, though, here's the tricky part, because as an empathy guy, it's important not to jump too fast, right? And there's a balance there. It's like we want to, when someone's suffering in present time, when the suffering's
Yeah.
like happening now, um, of course we want to kind of give them that viewpoint, but we don't want to have it be a bypass to avoid acknowledging the pain that they're in, or even the pain that they experienced in the past, And it just helps us to get out of that right, wrong, good, bad paradigm that we tend to live in. There's obviously, oh God, how do I say this without being judgmental? In my perspective, there are certain political leaders that have a very right, wrong. You're either with me or you're against me. You're either good or you're bad. If
Yeah.
you look like me and think like me, you're good, and otherwise you're bad. And that's like such ancient way of being. It's such an old paradigm. And yet it's terrifying to me how prevalent it still is.
Yeah.
However, the point that I'm trying to make is this pandemic is interesting because it's a total global crisis and nobody's at war. It's not a crisis because one country's at war with another. It's actually to this global event that almost everybody on the planet is aware of, and a big majority of the planet is impacted by it. And I'm wondering if it'll bring us together in some way.
Well, it will for the people who want that. And, as you know, there's some political leaders who move in a different direction.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it does give a big opportunity. Big suffering leads to big opportunities. The question is, can you see the opportunity, or are you just too stuck in mental loops that prevent you from seeing it? So, like this, is part of you taking an opportunity in either you doing it or you watching it, to bring people together,
Yeah.
and then realize how much we value that, how much we need that, and also how much we need empathy as well. You're obviously the master at that, and one of the reasons why I like hanging out with you is that you're really good at that. And you can't skip that step, like you said. If you skip it, you're kind of just doing a spiritual bypass. And so, there's best practices to getting through difficult times quickly and with a minimum of pain, that involves
Mm.
empathy, that involves asking, like, what could be good about this? What opportunity might I take? Taking really good care of yourself, connecting with others. And something I appreciate about the pandemic, I wrote an article called The Great Thing About the Pandemic. Uh, One of the things I said is, things weren't that great in the world before. And, species extinction, global warming, political situation. And, it's kind of like, I imagine a bunch of angels looking over at the earth and saying, okay, we got to reboot this thing. We got to shake them up and just see what pans out at the end. And so we're all getting that. And, when you're shaken, it doesn't feel good when you're shaken. But hopefully when the shaking's done, some of the parts that needed to fall off the tree will have fallen off the tree.
Yeah.
That's both globally and in you and me.
Yeah. I think that I want to riff on that for a minute. And by the way, Paul McFarlane, I love what you've written, and I'm going to respond to your question or present it to Jonathan in a moment. I do think it's a big, incredible global shakeup. And what I'm noticing is it's a return to simplicity,
Mm-hmm.
right? Notice how simple our lives have become. I mean, we're, we're pretty much home most of the time. We're not doing all this big traveling. We're with pretty much the same people, whoever happens to live with us, um, and maybe a few neighbors close by. We're still able to connect, thank God, digitally, but there's a simplicity that's happening. We're simplifying, and of course now the reports beginning to come out how the air is the cleanest it's been in a really long time. Um, there's a beginning of an environmental, it's like all the years of environmental protesting, the pandemic has actually created more positive things for the environment than anything else that's worked.
Yeah.
And it is almost like Mother Nature's like, okay, everybody out of the pool, time out, you know? And and again, definitely acknowledging the pain of people who've lost loved ones. 30% unemployment in certain areas, that's rough.
Yeah.
Um, but it's there is a lot going on. And the last thing I want to say, and this is why Love Coach Academy is doing 2 or 3 webinars a day, free, online, because so many people now are having to deal with their relationship to their self, their body, their immune system,
Mm-hmm.
their relationship to whoever they're living with, or for those people who are alone, then really a lot of relationship to self issues coming up. Um, and people that are in living with people, like if those relationships are fractured, what happens when there's pressure? The fracture grows greater, the
Yeah.
fissure grows greater. So a lot of people have been reaching out to me as a coach, and then now through our shows, that are like, oh my God, my husband and I are really going at it. Or, my kids are going crazy and I don't know how to manage them, let alone school them. And so we're just trying to provide as much relationship support as possible. And the last thing I'll say, and bring it back to Jonathan, and in addition to our human relationships, relationship to self is also a time to reevaluate our relationship to life.
Mm-hmm.
What am I doing with my life? Jonathan talked about the joy of meditation. And most people don't think of, I guess, meditators can imagine it as joyful. People that haven't experienced the joy of meditation maybe don't necessarily get the joy in that. So
Yeah.
those are some of my musings, and I'll turn it back over to you for your thoughts.
Well, I agree with everything you say. And, I'm also getting a lot of couples and people calling me. A lot of them say, well, we've not been good for a couple of years, but this now made it really clear we need help, you
Right,
know?
right.
And I think those types of shakeups are good because we can get lost in our patterns that we just get used to.
Hmm.
And now there's like nothing that we can get used to. Every you have to make new decisions every day, and nothing's certain.
Yeah.
So it does bring up a lot of stuff that was a little bit hidden before.
Hmm.
I think that's good. And I want to make a comment on the meditation thing. Um, with some people have extra time and they can explore stuff that they couldn't explore before, whether it be like your relationship with yourself or your creator or meditation. And I tell people, keep exploring until you find something that works for you. On my uh, website, awarenessexplorers.com, we have 50 guided meditations, 50 different types of guided meditations, all free. And I haven't found anybody who has gone through more than a dozen of those that didn't say one of them really worked for them spectacularly. People think meditation's one thing. Well, no, or you don't say that broccoli represents all food. So there's a lot of things to explore, and for a lot of people, there's a space now to try different stuff. And for a long time, I found meditation very boring. And then I found a couple of meditation techniques that worked extremely well for me. And now it's my favorite thing to do.
So, what makes it your favorite thing to do? Like, what do you experience that the emotions, the sensations, what is it that makes it so wonderful for you?
Well, there's three different types of meditation that I do. One I call the love meditation, where I get to experience, like when you just fall in love with somebody and you experience that overwhelming love. Well, I get to experience that anytime I do this meditation.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty
Wow.
spectacular.
That
And then
wow,
there's
yeah.
a,
Yeah.
well, I've been doing it for a while, but um, anybody can really. I'll give a technique for doing it. See, make a list of everybody you've ever loved in your life,
Hmm.
and then go through one by one and remember times that they did something or you felt total love for them. And
Hmm.
I have like 40 people on that list that I've loved in my life. And I go through each one. After a while, it builds a momentum. And soon you're like in a state of total love just
Hmm.
by thinking about this person, what they did, what you love about them. And this is very, very powerful to submerge yourself in an ocean of love.
Hmm.
It's very healing. Not that there's not resistance. Even though this is intense love, for the first 5 minutes I do this meditation, I always resist it. And then for the next hour, I just swim in love. So
Hmm.
that's an example. I have a bliss meditation where I get to experience lots of what I call bliss. Um, and I have a meditation that feels a little bit like a low level orgasm that goes on for a while. Um, so different meditations do different things. Uh, One helps me to feel very connected to what I would call God or creator. There, there's like it's like a radio station. You tune to different frequencies,
Hmm.
and we just have to find that knob. And most of us experience love at some point, so you can tune to that frequency. And it takes practice. I've been at it for a while.
Are these available on your podcast?
Yeah, they're available at awarenessexplorers.com with all the episodes, but also there's a thing called meditations there, and we have about 40 or 50 guided meditations
Wow.
that
Well, that's
are
definitely,
free.
yeah,
And
definitely. If you, to be fair, put in the chat box the link to where people can get the podcasts. And for example, right now, Gary Crane writes the list of all you love exercise. Fantastic. Jamal writes, I love this. Such gratitude for what you're sharing. Um, so people want it. I want it. I'm like, hey, let. But I always had that experience. I want you to know, by the way, look at what I keep right by my thing. Jonathan gave this to me for my Christmas birthday present,
uh-huh.
and I when I'm so and it's what I love about this is it's like a practical present. Like it's
Yeah.
really practical. So thank you. And I didn't put it here just because I was doing this. But I noticed. I thought, I do want you to know that it lives with all my important things right within reach. This, along with my reptile brain toy,
Ah,
right, and my magic wand. These are the three essentials that I keep right
right,
by
right.
me.
I have one that I really like a lot that people ask me about. Um, I call it, and I think I've given you one of these. It's a finger ring, and you
Yes.
see it really clearly. And you put it on your finger, and it kind of does like a self acupuncture.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's really nice. I like that one.
Yeah. 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 That's good. All right. We do have a question.
Uh,
Um, Paul McFarland wrote, uh, "What's a good, practical, tangible practice for gratitude in the dark when we're really in the darkness
yeah.
of?"
Well, I'm not going to repeat my main gratitude. Actually, I'll give you another gratitude story.
Okay.
Uh, as you know, at one time I did a book in which I was interviewing spiritual leaders, and I was surprised at how many of them mentioned gratitude. So I was once with this Lakota medicine man, and I asked him, "How do you connect with God or Great Spirit?" And he said, "Wait, before we get into that, I have a little prayer to do." And I say, "Okay." And he says, "Rock that I'm sitting on, thank you for being here. Your strength and your beauty give me strength and beauty." And then he mentioned the tree above him. "Thank you for the beauty of the tree," and then "Thank you for the squirrel passing by and the blue sky." And this was nice for 5 minutes. But then I'm like, can we get on with this? And this went on for 15 minutes, him thanking everything he could see. And finally, I'm kind of annoyed. I said, "So how do you tap into, connection with Great Spirit?" And he said, "I just showed you how I did that. I thank everything I'm feeling and seeing and hearing. And that makes me very present rather than lost in my story in my head." And so when things are dark, trying to get present with the actual sensations, the things you see, the things you hear. Like, what are 5 things I can hear right now?
Hmm.
Now, Scott, that because of my stepfather hitting me in the way that he did, I have only about 20% hearing. I have 2 massive hearing aids that I use all the time. So people don't notice it that much. Um, so, I'm grateful every time I can hear anything, because when I take my hearing aids out, I don't hear anything,
Hmm.
you know. Uh, and that just like, what am I hearing? What am I seeing? That puts you more in the present versus in the story of how dark things are.
Hmm.
And that can be a great way to, in a way, be travel the lifeline of gratitude up out of a dark hole.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. I didn't know that about your hearing down to 20% either. So I'm
Yeah,
learning.
yeah.
I mean,
Well,
it's amazing.
you knew I had the hearing aids,
I
right?
knew about the hearing aids,
Yeah,
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 not quite the depth of it.
yeah. They're
So
about $10,000 each.
holy moly.
Yeah,
um, so I'm going to offer a piece for how to go out of the darkness, and it's um, we get in touch with whatever it is that we're in pain around. What's the deficiency, right? Usually we're in pain because there's some form of separation or disconnect going on in our life. So I'm just going to choose an example, but you could really take this practice and use it. By the way, a lot of people are writing brilliant and loving what you're sharing.
Mm.
Um, so you take what you're missing. So let's just say you're missing a lover. You have a lover or a friend, somebody that was close to you, and they've either left or they've died. They're no longer in your life, and you're really missing them. So you notice, where in your body does it hurt? Where does it hurt? Where's that? Yeah. And you get in touch with that. And then you get in touch with what are the fundamental values? What is it that I'm missing on a single word? Maybe it's connection, intimacy, friendship. And you pick 2 or 3 universal human needs. It's a big part of what we do with Love Coach Academy and Marshall Rosenberg's teaching. And then you mourn. You really allow yourself to mourn. And mourning can come in many different ways. It could be crying, it could be pounding a pillow, it could be doing jumping jacks, it can be just whatever it takes. Imagine that you're purging, you're literally moving the energy. So usually I find the most effective mourning is sound and movement. Crying and moving, wailing, letting whatever comes out, doing, like I said, doing jumping jacks, sound and movement. You move it until you can feel wherever that contraction was in your body, maybe in your heart, maybe in your belly, you can feel an opening. There's more space because you've moved some of the energy. And then you really get in touch with that space. And then you go back to the things you're missing: intimacy, connection, friendship. Those are just the 3 that I chose. And then you remember when you experienced intimacy with that person that you're missing. You remember when you experienced friendship with that person. And you remember when you experienced the depth of connection. And as you're remembering it, you really choose specific memories, and you fill that empty space with the memory of what you experienced that you're now missing. And what happens is it creates what I call a bitter-sweet cocktail. It's bitter because you're missing the person. We don't spiritually bypass that. But it's also sweet because you're remembering why you missed them. You're remembering the beauty. And then what happens is we do drop into the gratitude of, he or she may be gone now. And I'm so grateful for those moments shared. And then you always have a choice where we want to put the attention. Do you want to put the attention more on the missing and the deficiency? And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's usually uncomfortable. Or do you want to then put the attention on remembering the beautiful experiences that you're missing? And frankly, I do this a lot with my wife. She died 8.5 years ago. I mean, that's been quite a while now since she died. And I still do that. And it keeps a bittersweet memory of her alive in my heart and in
Mm.
my being. So anyway, that was a practice for when we're in the dark time.
That's beautiful,
There's some
Scott.
court.
I love that, and I love how deep a practice that is. And it's important to know that being joyous does not mean that you don't experience difficult things. It's really what you do with them, and that's a great practice for dealing with really deep stuff.
Hmm. Debbie Garcia, we've got a few comments here. Gary Crane writes, a gratitude exercise I do every night when I lay down to go to sleep. For many years now, I just mentally think of at least 10 things I did, said, or saw, or that happened to me that made me happy, for which I'm grateful. So I always fall asleep in a state of gratitude. Some nights I even remember 15 or 20. So thank you, Gary. That's beautiful. Debbie Garcia is loving what we're sharing here. Susan May, hi Susan, says, so grateful for your wise wisdom. And Debbie Garcia mentions that her best friend passed away 4 years ago today, and that she's missing his laughter and also grateful for the memories. And Debbie, if you want to come join us in the Zoom room, I'd love to have you come join us for a few minutes. You know what the link is. Um, and last one here is Diane. Oh, two more. Diane writes, I just finished doing this, and then I heard you say it. So that's a nice little synchronicity.
Uh-huh.
And Jamal writes, I really needed this. Thank you for sharing, Jonathan and Scott. I love and appreciate you guys.
Hmm.
Thank you. That's beautiful.
I want to say a very brief story. Many years ago, when I interviewed the Dalai Lama, um, I asked him, does he ever feel uh, guilty or bad about anything he's done? 'Cause at the time, I was struggling with my inner critic. And he shared a story of how he had once said something to someone, and they had interpreted it in a way that they ended up killing themselves,
Whoa.
committing suicide, and that he felt like he should have said it in a different way that wouldn't have led to that. And I said, so how did you overcome that feeling of guilt and feeling sad about that? And he said, I never overcame that. He said, I hold that dear in my heart because that helped me to connect with some of the difficulties and the guilt that other people feel. That you said that's part of the human experience, and that the idea is not to erase these things; it's to expand your heart to a point where it's all allowed and
Hmm.
it's all part of being human. And
Yeah.
that answer affected me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I'm really appreciating you saying that. And it's so not going into some practice. And what I like about that is often when we have pain, personal pain like that, we want to get rid of it,
Hmm.
right? We're going to do whatever it takes to get rid of it. Go all the way to see John of God, go do, climb a mountain backwards through the
Yeah,
snow, whatever it is, just to get rid of that pain. And what I'm interpreting that story to mean is that he integrated it into the
yeah,
fabric of his being.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when people come to me, I often suggest that they um, allow it to be there just as it is for now. And that kind of is like a like roto-rooter that allows the stuck energy to start to move, because normally we're resisting or we're doing whatever, and allowing something to be there, even welcoming it, is usually what starts some movement to happen.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I see that Debbie G came in, and we'll introduce her in a second. Hey,
Yeah.
Debbie G, there you are. Debbie G, Goddess of Gratitude. Uh, I want to tell a really quick story that just is connected to the Dalai Lama story, and then I
Uh,
would love to hear Debbie G's gratitude tips, since that's a big part of what we did. But
mhm,
when I heard that story, it reminded me of a story about another wonderful spiritual teacher that I think we all know, Reverend Michael Beckwith.
mhm,
And the story I'm going to share is he told this story when I interviewed him for a television show I did a while back. So it's a public story. So for those of you who don't know, Reverend Michael is the founder of Agape International Center, and it's become this incredible source of spiritual, universal spiritual teaching, wisdom. And Reverend Michael's a really amazing guy. And so I asked him a question about, what's the biggest lesson he ever learned? What's the hardest lesson he ever learned? And he said it was the lesson of learning to trust when you know or see something that nobody else knows or sees. And then the story is that it was in the early days of his organization, and they had almost no money at all. And that, by the way, that's when I met him. I first went to Agape when we were sitting on metal folding chairs in the basement of the Santa Monica Miramar Hotel. That's where it began, and
mhm,
I knew him back then. So it was around those times, and times were very lean. They didn't have much money, and somebody had donated a car, an old Cadillac, but it wasn't running. And they figured out what part it needed. And there was some young kid who was just kind of hanging around. He was kind of a, ne'er do well kid, just trying to be part of this thing that was happening. And he got really excited. He said, I can do that. I can get that part for us. I can get that part. And everybody got all excited. Hey, that's great. It was like, oh, good. This kid can contribute. And Reverend Michael looks at the kid, and behind the kid, he sees the apparition of an angel going.
Uh,
And Reverend Michael doesn't normally see things like that. So he was wondering, is this my mind? Am I, and the kid's all excited. And the angel's, but the kid was so excited, everybody was so into it that Reverend Michael didn't say, no, don't do that. He just said,
uh-huh.
well, okay. Well, the next day, they discovered that that kid was shot and killed breaking into an auto parts, one of those big, fenced off areas, trying to
Uh-huh.
break into a thing. And so it's very similar to that Dalai Lama story. It's like that recognition that, wow, I could have made a different action that may have saved a life. And again, how Reverend Michael, at that point, he just integrated into, I will always follow inner guidance, even if it goes against the grain of what everybody else is thinking or wanting or believing or seeing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so just to weave it back and then bring it to Debbie, there it is. It's like when we do have those dark, hard things, absolutely do meditation, do gratitude, but also recognize that the pain that we carry, the lessons learned, is a permanent part of our fabric, and not to necessarily be too eager to get rid of it, but learn how to integrate it because it's a part of us. And with that, I'm going to put the spotlight on Debbie G, Debbie Gratitude, to hear your thoughts about joy in this time of pandemic.
Hi, everybody. Oh my gosh, I'm really excited to be here. Hi, Scott. I'm always excited to come on with Scott. And Jonathan, first time I think I've been on with you. Nice to meet you.
You too.
I've been enjoying this tremendously. And thank you both for providing such unique perspectives on how that we deal with different things that come up. Uh, I love what you were sharing about tapping into our intuition and why do we go with our gut. And one of the things that was coming to me as you were talking about that was, when we go against our own internal guidance system, sometimes we end up with things that we might perceive as dark. Like getting involved with that guy that probably I know I'm getting the red flags I should not be dating right now. Okay. I've had this happen and I go against my gut and then I wind up in this relationship that doesn't it is still for my best and highest good because it's teaching me something along the way about boundaries or whatever. But when I go against my gut, it may not be the type of experience I'm hoping for. And so going for our gut or going with our gut is such a huge thing. And the times that I don't, it's betrayal to myself and against my own boundaries. And I'm also not practicing my Love Coach Academy tools at all if I'm doing that, you know. But today, actually, I want to take a skip over here to talk about somebody named Bob Miller. A
Hmm.
few years ago, I met this gentleman and he was the practice gratitude success uh, guru. I'll call him. I'm going to call him a guru, even though I don't believe in gurus. I'm still going to do that just because I'm honoring him today. But he was somebody who had belief in me, no matter what. He always lifted me up, and I was in lots of dark spaces at that time. And he really taught me how to look for the silver lining and those things that I wasn't seeing as being anything but icky, but it really had to do with the shift in my perspective. It was within my choice, and they were all my choices, and it took taking 100% accountability for my own life. But he really showed me all of these things, and I just want to say it's today uh, was 4 years ago he passed away and left us, and he was doing videos before it was even a thing. before it was a thing. He was doing it like on Google Hangouts. And as I sat down, and Scott said, "Hey, come over and get on," I sit down and oh, you can't see it. Shoot, it says gratitude. As soon as I sat down, that was the top card. So today, apparently, the big message is about gratitude, and I just want to share a couple of things for you naysayers out there. And the gratitude myth busting. If you continually express gratitude, it won't mean anything. Now, that's a load of malarkey in my book. Gratitude has no boundaries, and your first sign of gratitude is as effective as the next. So as long as you're being genuine with your gracious nature, the more, the better. So keep doing it. Showing gratitude means you're weak. Has anybody ever felt that before? If you've been brought up and you just like you're showing a sign of weakness, I don't. And think about that. Another myth, and it's just not true. There is no correlation between showing thanks and being weak. In fact, the opposite is true. If you choose to express gratitude, then you are gaining internal strength and so much more. So, myths are busted.
Thank you, Debbie G. Thank you, thank you. Jonathan and I share many things, and one is that we are both dog lovers, and so this is one of my two beautiful dogs, and Debbie G has two dogs as well, and Jonathan has two dogs. We all have two dogs, and they are our amazing teachers of love and wisdom. And Jonathan has, being the brilliant man that he is, wrote a book called Conversations with Dog. And Jonathan, I would love for you to share a little bit about the book and maybe specifically what what your dogs have taught you about joy.
Yeah, the book, obviously it's a novel, but I noticed that my dogs are very happy, and that in a way, Debbie mentioned that she's not following a guru, but our dogs can be kind of like the modern day gurus, because who is a better example of unconditional love and play? Dogs are the best at that. And so I imagine that my dog in the book, it has a whole plot and it's fun, but the master can hear his dog's thoughts in his head, and they have conversations where they're each trying to, understand each other's world. And and he realizes that this dog he has is really his guru and therapist, and trying to teach him about love and play and enjoying life. And it's, a heartwarming story. And a lot of people have really enjoyed the book because we love dogs, for the people who do. And sometimes I just look at my dog and I imagine what she's thinking, and it helps put me in the present, because dogs are always in the present.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my dogs wouldn't exist unless it was you, Scott. You basically, Bailey sings your praises every day. My dog Bailey, because uh, my two dogs now get along great, and you mentioned, hey, you should get a second dog for your dog Sophie, and they're having a wonderful time.
Yeah, it was cool because I went to visit Jonathan. He has a beautiful home in Nevada City, and I brought my two dogs with me. And I'm just aware of how my two dogs play with each other all the time. And the dog that he currently, his original dog, Sophie, she got so excited to have two other dogs to play with. And I was there for whatever, 2 or 3 days, and the three of them were just constantly playing. And I
Yeah.
really realized, well, yeah, Sophie, they're pack animals. She wants to have another buddy. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I kind of went to bat, and I'm glad that you decided to do that.
Yeah.
So coming back to the topic of joy, um, I want to screen share for a second. Jonathan has a recent book called The Technology of Joy: The 101 Best Apps, Gadgets, Tools, and Supplements for Feeling More Delight in Your Life. Now, isn't this a book that would be of value to all of us? Right? So, Jonathan, tell us a little bit about the book and how we can get it.
Sure. Well, when you ask, what do you want in life? People usually want the same things. They want, love, joy, peace. Love can happen through learning how to communicate better. But how do you get more joy? Well, it ends up there are simple ways to get more joy. It might be a supplement. It might be a gadget. Uh, Scott was mentioning the gadget I gave him for Christmas. That really, I became like a investigator or a scientist. What brings me joy? One of the things that brings me joy is my dogs, so I spend time with them. But there's a lot of little things that most people don't know about that you can literally buy for $2 or something like that. I'll get one of them here. You've probably seen one of these. These are head tinglers. And, doing this to my wife or doing it to each other, it's a pretty incredible feeling. And that costs $1.95 at Amazon. We do that. There you go. You get yours as well. We do that often. So if you know that joy is what you want in life and you become focused, I often ask people what brings them joy because maybe I'm missing out on something. I want to make sure I know all the best ways to get there. And the book, of course, it's available on Amazon. I give my reviews of the 101 best methods, best things you can get that stimulate joy. And all you need is 2 or 3. And if they work for you, you have a friend for life.
I'm pretty sure you gave me this head tingler,
Probably.
actually. I think so, yeah. I think I got that from you. So the head tingler that I got from Jonathan, my little rubber mallet, this guy's like the king of toys.
Well,
Speaking of which,
one thing that brings me joy is giving gifts to people.
yeah.
That's I don't tell Scott this, Scott.
Oh, okay.
But the head tingler and the little hammer thing, probably between them they cost $10. And think of brought a deeper connection between us. You like it, I like it. That's a pretty good use of $10 to bring that much joy.
Yeah. Now you are a serious friend. You really are. I remember when we first met, and we decided we wanted to kind of explore friendship, and you sent me like this pretty elaborate list of things about yourself and questions that I could answer so you could get to know me more. And it was like the desire for depth was really, really cool. I appreciate that. I remember that.
Yeah. Actually, if people want that list, at morelovelessconflict.com, if they put in their email address, it gives the 12 questions of instant intimacy. So morelovelessconflict.com. And, you take turns answering these questions and it really does lead to a really nice connection.
Beautiful. A couple of last things from here and then we'll do our final thoughts. Gary Crane writes again, speaking of play and fun, I have 2 boxes of fantastic books and videos on this that I'd love to donate or loan to anyone. Since I travel and I don't have the storage space, I could rent the space or rather use the money to save refugees, etc. So people can reach out to Gary Crane and let him know if you want some of his books and fantastic things. Jana writes, thank you for the reminder, Debbie G, to be truthful to yourself and listen to your inner wisdom. And she also has 2 dogs as well. So this is definitely, there's a 2 dogs theme emerging here. A couple kind of closing announcements and give each of you a chance to give one final thought on this topic. Just a reminder, Love Coach Academy is doing this twice a day and sometimes 3 times. And tonight, every Tuesday night, it's Fan Tuesday. These guys does Fan Tuesdays. And it's at 7:30 p.m., which is in half an hour. We have Fan Tuesday, the amazing global minstrel musician who's going to be playing music. He reads poetry, he does musings, and that's right here on Love Coach Academy on the same page that you're watching. So if you're interested, come watch Fan Tuesday tonight. And then every day, 9 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the evening, we're doing something fun, something wonderful. And so it's a chance for you to connect. So last thing I want to just mention is this Saturday night, our big show, our flagship show, Jonathan's been on it, our Saturday Night Live for the Global Peace Tribe. We've got Marianne Williamson, and Andrew Harvey and Lori Grace, all talking about sacred activism, and some amazing musicians, Louisa Stowe, Human, and it's just this beautiful, wonderful, inspirational variety show. So I really want to encourage everybody to come check it out, and it's something I'm quite proud of. All right, final tips for gratitude and joy in this time of pandemic. Debbie G, what's your final thought for the night?
I think I'll go with door number A. Joy is gratitude's belly button. Woohoo!
I like that choice. Thank you. A little dose of silly there. Jonathan, what's your final thought?
Well, I like this term sympathetic joy, which means being able to celebrate the joy in other beings. So when my dogs are playing, I just totally get into how much fun they're having, and soon just watching them. And you could do that with dogs, with kids, with anybody having a joyful moment. If you can't beat them, join them, and that's a way that you can have more joy in your life.
Beautiful. Diane writes that she makes about 40 loaves of bread a week and gives them away.
Wow.
And that brings all sorts of joy to her to give away. And that's a wonderful thing. As Marshall Rosenberg taught us, the greatest joy in life is contributing to the well-being of others. And so I want to say that two things come up for me, joy. These are roses from off my rose bush, and they are bringing me so much joy that it's that time of year. And the joy of friendship. And Jonathan and Debbie, you two of my closest friends in the world. It's kind of fun to bring you both together on the show at the same time.
Yeah, it was nice seeing you, Debbie. Nice meeting you.
She makes a lot of wonderful things happen for a lot of people. She's pretty special. And thank you, everybody, for watching. Also, those of you watching the video replay, actually, most of the people that watch my shows watch the video recording. So thank you, but also thank you to all the people who were watching us live as well. Let's all bring more joy into our lives. And Fantuzzi will be here in a half an hour to bring more joy as well. Jonathan, thank you so much.
My pleasure,
Debbie,